Hello and welcome to a new podcast called Red Lines and Half Spaces. I am Yemin, Yembele. There's many different names for me. Yemin Yamal is the one that's sticking at the moment. You may have heard me from the Latte Firm with our good friend F Carnage and from a few other bits and pieces. But we're trying a new show. I'm doing it with my good friend Joe Husson. Joe, nice to speak to you and actually to do this kind of podcast. We've been talking about it for a while, but here we are. How are you feeling?
We have, mate. Yeah, it's good. I'm excited for it. Like we said, mate, before when we spoke about it, it's a bit of you could say it's a saturated market somewhat, but everyone loves talking about Arsenal. I'm sure there's a thirst for more Arsenal content. You can't get enough of the Gunners, so here we are, providing the people with yet more Arsenal content.
Well, exactly. I mean, we're going to try to provide some insightful content. I don't know if I will be able to. I have. I will say it from the outset. I am not as good. Joe has a wealth of experience. I'm going to go talk about it in a second, but yeah, I think we've got a fan base that is hungry for information, wants to talk about Arsenal, and hopefully we can provide some semblance of a show that people are interested in. But Joe, what I wanted to talk about initially was obviously people have heard me, on the Latte Firm, which is, look, we can't praise it enough. It's an excellent show, and Faisal does such a good job, and we're going to hopefully have him on the show at some point. But obviously, you've been on the show a couple of times, but not too many people know your background. Do you want to just talk a bit about, just briefly about what you do? Because obviously, we're going to audience, just a quick FYI, we're going to be doing some tactical work on this show, and the reason is Joe is very, very experienced in this area, so we want to really tap into that experience. So, Joe, do you want to just give a bit of background as to how you're involved, tactically, manager, in a manager sense, what you've been doing and why we're, trying to look at it in this kind of way?
Yeah, of course, mate. First of all, what I'll say is don't put yourself down, Yem. You are a TNT analyst, so let's not put you down too much there, sir.
Faisal
But
calls me a menace. Faisal calls me a menace. Other people call me
well,
different.
pot kettle. But, myself, yeah. So basically, probably got about 20 years of coaching experience, if you like. Won't shout about this too much, but I did do some stuff for Chelsea in their kind of youth setup. We won't mention that too much, being an Arsenal podcast. But yeah, gained some experience there. I've done most of my coaching stuff has been at the semi-pro level. A couple of different clubs in the North London area, ranging from first team coach to an under 21 sort of joint manager with a colleague, sort of split between us. So yeah, mate, like I said, I've done quite a bit of football. Most of it has been sort of youth related stuff, but obviously semi pro level has been more first team coaching orientated that way, mate. So yeah, it's been enjoyable. Life is sort of getting in the way of that now, so I guess this is a way of me to hold on to that love of coaching. I
Aren't we
forgot
all?
by
Aren't we
talking
all
about it,
holding on
but
to holding on to?
yeah, but you know
It's
what it's like, mate. Life sort of gets in the way at times, doesn't it? When you've got sort of other commitments and other things going on. So
yeah.
I see this as a bit of a marriage of both worlds. Can commit a bit of time to sort of speaking about the coaching rather than being out on the grass as much anymore.
Well, we're definitely going to be speaking about the coaching at some point. I
Mm.
mean, the hope is obviously if people do like it, and I hope you do like it, people out there, that we will, look a bit more into the tactical aspects of games, of how Mikel is setting up the team. Are there issues? Are there concerns? And what we really think about the coming season and all of that. But this show, we wanted to focus on a review of the season. The season is over, thank God. It's been a long season, but we want to take a look at how our season went, try and look at in depth in a bit more, trying to reminisce about the games, talk about obviously some of the controversial moments, some of the, the big issues that occurred during the season. So, Joe, why don't we get started on that? Let's start at the beginning with the transfer window. When Arsenal started this window, we had high expectations, didn't we? Well, I mean, for me personally, I think, like most people, I thought a striker was going to come in, and I thought we were going to really grab the bull by the horns and try to mount, to assemble a squad that would be, would be able to challenge for the Premier League, having come so close in the past two seasons. I mean, what did you think?
Yeah, same to you. I think same as everyone. And quite annoyingly, Your opinion and views of the transfer window are probably very similar to what they are this season, which I think speaks volumes about the last transfer window. Is that essentially we didn't do the business that we felt we needed to do, which has obviously played out this season, which I'm sure we'll go into more detail later. But yeah, like you, mate, like everyone else, I think the big thing was crying out for a centre forward. And I think given how we finished the season before, going on that run, only dropping points in, was it one game in about 20 at the end of the season? I think everyone thought all we need is a striker. If we can stick someone up top who's going to get us those goals, yeah, we could obviously do with filling in a few positions, maybe a few backup players just to supplement what we already had, because the squad was thin. I mean, we did go through the back end of that season with no injuries, which obviously caught up with us this year. But I think everyone was kind of of the opinion, yeah, a couple more bodies in, but the main thing was a striker. So for us not to do that at the time was obviously disappointing, and how the season's played out as sort of salt in the wounds, if you like. But no, like you said, mate, for me, it was the striker was the missing piece of the puzzle, if you like, just to continue that confidence from finishing last season into obviously this one.
Yeah, and I think we all hoped that, apart from a striker, we would progress some of these big, to get not necessarily bigger signings, but signings that would elevate us to that next level.
Yes.
But let's go through our transfer business so we can talk about them. David Raya obviously signed on a permanent deal from Brentford. That was about 30 million. We then had Riccardo Calafiore. I have to go with that, who joined from Bologna for about 33 million. And then obviously we also had Mikel Merino join from Real Sociedad. And then obviously we have the deadline day signings of Neto and Raheem Sterling. I'll come to the outbound transfers in a minute for people out of the club. How did you view those signings? Let's start off with David Raya. 30 million, came in the season before, and immediately, after a few games, surpassed Aaron Ramsdale, and really has, I think, cemented himself as one of the top goalkeepers in the Premier League, and that's been shown. Double Golden Glove winner. I think this was a no-brainer, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I think big props to Mikel Arteta for this one. So I remember at the time when we first bought Raya in on loan, we had obviously the Ramsdale Raya debate, didn't we, raging on, and he didn't help himself really by saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to rotate my number ones. He might play, I might even sub him." Came out of all that rubbish just to sort of cover himself. But no, David Raya, for, like you said, 2 Golden Gloves in the last 2 seasons, he's been outstanding. We'll go into it more later, but arguably our player of the season, in my opinion, as well. He's definitely up there as a contender. But yeah, he's out. At the time, I think everyone was happy with the signing, and obviously how he's gone on to perform this season to cement what he did last. I think for the money that we paid, it is, I would argue, that's a bargain, personally. If you look at the top goalkeepers in the world these days, 30 million is, well, sounds stupid, but a drop in the ocean, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy now how even goalkeepers are so expensive, even the average ones. Riccardo Calafiore, for 33.6 million. Played in the Euros, had an outstanding Euros with Italy, highly regarded from Bologna. 33 million. For me personally, at that point, I thought, wow, that's a great signing. And I think, looking at him in the Euros, he was Italy's best player by a mile. What did you think when we signed him?
Similar to you, mate. I'll be honest, I didn't know much about him until the Euros. The Euros was the first time I really saw anything of him. But from what we did see, it looked like a very good signing. My initial thought was that he was being brought in as a centre-back, sort of to share the load with Gabriel. So at that time, I thought, yeah, brilliant signing, great rotation option for Gabriel, means he can get a bit of a rest. Got 2 very good left-sided centre-halves now. Obviously, it turned out that we didn't see him at centre-half until
end of season, isn't it?
Until about June, yeah. So,
the last game that he played, the last game.
But, yeah, so, no, it was, again, positive signing. And I think what I liked about that is that it took the burden off of Gabriel, is what my initial thinking was. Obviously, we know he could do a job at left back, but I wasn't thinking that he was going to play there. I thought, okay, good rotation option. We move from there.
Yeah, I mean, no one thought, obviously he would be the starting left back, but we could talk about that later in another podcast.
Yeah.
But Mikel Merino. Mikel Merino for me was a bit of a hard one because his stats were amazing in terms of his dual. He's a dual monster, as Arteta called him. But his stats were really good. He'd had a very good couple of years with Real Sociedad. Came over and was about 27 million. I thought that was a good value signing. Actually, he's nothing. I thought obviously he maybe he is the left-sided centre midfield answer that we've been crying for at that point. What did you think, Joe?
To be honest, mate, I think with Merino, I saw that as more of a sort of a floor raiser than a ceiling raiser, if you like, if that makes sense. So for me, I think obviously backup options before we've had your sort of Mohamed El Nenis, for example. And I think Merino is a big step up from a Mohamed El Neni. So in that aspect, I think it's a good signing because we've given ourselves a better option in midfield coming from the bench, which is what I thought he's been brought in to do predominantly. Played at a good level, obviously represents Spain. So he's bringing a level of ability with him that I think surpassed what El Neni could do. Don't take this as El Neni slander. I love the man, but at Arsenal we needed something more. And yeah, I just saw Merino as someone who was raising the sort of the level of the squad, if you like, from the ground up, rather than sort of pushing your likes of your Odegaards and your Declan Rices. But he was a good backup option to have, I think.
No, I agree with you. I think the value of the signing and his attributes, and that he was a full international, I think was an excellent value for money at that point.
Mm.
Then obviously it went a bit quiet for us until deadline day, and then we made two signings. The talk was obviously we needed a left winger, we needed a striker, we need, as we talked about initially. But then we got to deadline day, and our deadline day signings were Raheem Sterling from Raheem Sterling from Chelsea and Neto from Bournemouth. How did you view the Neto signing? Obviously, was a needed one because obviously Aaron Ramsdale did leave, and we'll talk about the outbounds in a second quite quickly. Raheem Sterling, last minute signing. What did you think at the time? We'll talk about him generally, but at the point of signing him.
Yes, let's go back to the days of when the sun was shining and everything seemed quite good. No, obviously Sterling wasn't a player who anybody wanted. Nobody wanted a Raheem Sterling at the club. However, given how short we were in the forward areas, other than your Trossard, Martinelli and Saka, we didn't really have much else there. So to bring Sterling in, won Premier Leagues, played in the Premier League since he was 17, 18, got calibre at this level, just thought, do you know what, as a backup option, if he was able to contribute 5 to 10 goals across the season, I think that would have been, do you know what, good backup option, can allow Saka a rest, can allow a bit of rotation, can play as a false nine maybe in the sort of against the smaller clubs, Carabao Cup, that sort of thing. Not ideal, not what we wanted, but I think at the time people could get on board with it, and I have no shame in saying that I fell for the propaganda, Ian. On that video, the montage, the signing, the
people
backlit,
wait to see the best
training
of me.
ground.
You're about to see the best of me. This kind of
I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. I was
Didn't we all?
Raheem Sterling was going to be Player of the Year, score 30 goals. I was all for it.
Yeah, and obviously we will talk about it in a minute. Okay, so let's quickly go through the outbounds. There are quite a few of them actually. So this summer actually was, I think, one of the first summers where we actually sold reasonably well. I think for the past couple of summers we haven't really sold much at all, have we, Joe?
No, I agree, mate. One of the one of the big things we've been criticised for, isn't it? Is that us fans have been critical of the board about is how poor our sales have been when you compare to the likes of your Liverpools, your Chelseas. We just, we don't seem to have that level of ability when it comes to getting rid of
Yeah.
players. But I think we addressed it to a certain degree last summer. I think when you look at the output of the players we've sold this season, I think you can't argue with the profits, if you like, that we've made on them.
Yeah, I think it's fair. So let me go through them quickly. For just Sambi Lokonga went to Sevilla on loan. Nuno Tavares joined Lazio, but with an obligation to buy, which is about 9 million, I think. Then you had Emil Smith-Rowe, one of our academy products, left us for Fulham on a permanent transfer. That was about 27, rising to 34 million. Then you've got Fabio Vieira back to Porto. Carl Hein went to Valladolid on a year loan. Then you've got obviously Aaron Ramsdale joining Southampton, permanent transfer, about 18 million with 7 million in addition add-ons. Then obviously Eddie Nketiah went for about 30 million, for about 25, rising to 30, maybe a bit more. And then Reece Nelson leaving for Fulham on a year-long loan. Let's talk about the two big ones, which is obviously Emil Smith-Rowe, Eddie Nketiah. Did you have any arguments with them leaving?
Eddie Nketiah, no. Emil Smith-Rowe tugged on the heartstrings a little because we all love Emil Smith-Rowe, but I think if you was to remove the sentimental and, the emotional attachment that you have to these players, I think you could argue that they weren't at the level that we was looking to get to. I think at the time, in hindsight now, if you'd said to me that we'd kept Emil Smith-Rowe for the season, I might not have been against it, because looking back at the season now, that extra body and how versatile he was could have made quite a big difference. But at the time, I don't think you could argue with, was it 34 million for Emil Smith-Rowe, we said, roughly?
Started about 20, about 34 million. So it's not our biggest deal. Our biggest deal, strange enough, is Alex Iwobi, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
Oxlade-Chamberlain. Chamberlain is our biggest deal. That's still...
Yeah.
How we've not managed to improve that is beyond me.
Wild, isn't it? But no, I think, with Emil Smith-Rowe and Nketiah going, I don't think that anyone was disappointed with their sales. I think people were disappointed with the incomings and the fact that we let them go without really bringing anyone else in.
The reinvestment in the squad, yeah. Any of the others really bothered you too much? For me, not personally. I think most. Look, Aaron Ramsdale was a fabulous goalkeeper, a very big personality, but he gave a couple of interviews which didn't stand him in good stead as a player, and as an elite player. And then obviously, when Raya came in and, let's be honest, surpassed him very quickly, I think the writing was on the wall, wasn't it? It was just who was going to go to.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. I think that interview he did where he said that he can't concentrate for 90 minutes was the nail in the coffin, if you like, for his Arsenal career, knowing what Mikel Arteta's like. So no real complaints with that. I think it was on the cards. I think we all knew it was coming. I did find the Fabio Vieira loan a bit strange, considering that how many people we were letting go, the likes of Smith-Rowe, etc., and that lack of cover we then had for Odegaard. I know we kind of earmarked Nwaneri maybe for that position, and we didn't want to block his path, but at the time it still seemed like we were leaving ourselves a bit short. So it transpired, but I don't think there was too many complaints at the time, mate. I think, like we mentioned before, the main complaint would have been not bringing anyone in once you've let all these players go. Yeah,
and obviously there's going to be lots of talk about transfer. We will inevitably talk about transfers. This first podcast, we're trying not to, because there's going to be so much, and that can fill a whole show. Let's turn to then the start of the Premier League. We're not going to cover the friendlies. The friendlies are what they are. They're a bit, good training exercises, etc. So we start the season off, Wolverhampton Wanderers, 2-0 at home. Then we go to Villa away, and that's a 2-0. And then we get to Brighton. Joe, we want to condense this down. We're trying to make this digestible for our views. The first two games, Wolves, I think that good start to the season, but there wasn't anything really of like a massive note there. I don't think it was anything amazing game or anything telling in there. Villa, always a tough place to go, but we got the victory and a 2-0, and that's, getting it away at your, not rivals, but they are a very close, team. They were on the cusp of the Champions League this season. They were in the Champions League last year. So I think that was a good victory. Do you agree with those two
Yes,
views?
mate. Yeah, the standout moment for me from that Villa game was the David Raya up and save from
Yeah.
Ollie Watkins. So yeah, good away win at Villa. Wolves at home, I think we expected to win, but yeah, I think the Villa away game, everyone saw that as a right. Do we mean business this season? We went there and won 2-0. Obviously, Raya pulled the heroics out, and then along came Brighton, which I'm sure we can discuss.
Just before that, obviously, what happened was the news that our new recruit Mika Marino got injured in the injury trail started, and this is a common theme. Mika Marino got injured in the first training session and would be out for what, 2 months almost? Was it
2 months? Yeah,
2 months.
roughly, wasn't it?
Gabriel Jesus again went down, and then obviously Tomiyasu were all injured. It set the tone, didn't it? Really, unfortunately for the season.
Yes, mate. Yeah, I mean, I think with Tomiyasu and Jesus, unfortunately, we have got into the mindset now of if they're available, it's a miracle, which is a shame. Especially when you consider what Jesus did for us and how he transformed us when he came in that first 6 months. Completely transformed our front line. That seems a distant memory now. And Tomiyasu, I'm a big fan of Tomiyasu. I think whenever he's played for us, he's been fantastic. Such a good sort of rotation option, can play left back, right back when he's available. Again, really disappointing for him. And I know these players get a lot of stick, but when it comes to the Tomiyasu, especially, it's difficult for me because I think from what we see from the outside looking in, he's an absolute model professional. And the length and consistency of these injuries screams of something quite serious. So hesitant to jump on his back and get rid of him. He can't do this for us, and all that sort of stuff. I just think, listen, he's a model professional, and a bit of sympathy goes out to him because he's clearly got quite a serious issue that he's managing.
Well, apparently there's also issues. It's not just physical issues. I mean, he's alone in this country. He doesn't have his family with him. There's always this talk about, we should, a lot of us treat players as robots, as you said, from the outside, and we do tend to do that because we think, they should be recovering really quickly and they should be perfect when they come back. These are human beings. It's hard to understand that as fans, and especially with Tomiyasu, it's such a heartbreaking one because he's such a good player, and it's just there's multiple things affecting him. So I do I think most fans really do hope he gets back to playing, or at least is happy within himself at some point, because it's just it's heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, as for Marino, what was it? Did Gabriel? Gabriel welcomed him to England by knocking him out and leaving him out for 2 months. So yeah, great start.
Great start. Right. The final game of August after the international break was Brighton. Brighton are a very good team. Let's not understate that. Been very, very well run, and they made a lot of signings. They made, I think, aside from Chelsea, the most signings in the summer window. But we would have expected, given our relative strength, to win that game, and we were on course for it until a bizarre incident in this game, in which a free kick was given to Brighton. Declan Rice had shuffled the ball out and, was just trying to make sure he was positioned correctly. So he jogged onto the field and made a slight tap. It was barely anything on the ball. But because of all these rules and all the interpretation that we've debated it so much over the season, it was adjudged as, delaying the restart of the game. And subsequently, Declan Rice was sent off. bizarrely. And then we had to play 10 with 10 men, and the game ended 1-1. Yeah, we scored our goal earlier in the game, but then with 10 men, Pedro came up and we ended 1-1. Joe, first of all, was the red card deserved in your opinion?
Well, I was hoping this was going to be quite cathartic, looking back on this season, but I can feel the rage burning already, and we're only into the first. Was this the third game of the season?
Yeah.
Was it a red card? It's an Arsenal red card, isn't it? Unfortunately, it's.
Do you want to explain that? Do you want to just explain that a little bit? Why you're saying it's an Arsenal red card as opposed to?
I mean, if we can go back, and there will be numerous examples of where red cards have been given to Arsenal players because of a new directive or some sort of new refereeing standard. But we're the only ones who get refereed to this new standard. I mean, you had the Declan Rice one. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But the penalty away at Brighton that was given away by Saliba for trying to head the ball. Never seen that before. Martinelli away at Wolves, was it? I believe the year before.
Yeah, the double
2 yellow cards.
The 2 yellow cards in a minute, effectively.
So yeah, I mean, it was an Arsenal red card. I mean, for me, I would have had no problem with that being a red card if across the Premier League, all instances of the ball being kicked away were dealt with in the same way. But you knew they weren't going to be, and they never were. No one else ever got a yellow card for kicking the ball away.
And it's a running theme, isn't it? This is a running theme, isn't it? The lack of consistency, and other fans of other clubs will say it as well. The lack of consistency in refereeing decisions has dogged us for so many years. The standard of refereeing I find in the Premier League is so poor, considering it is supposed to be the best league in the world.
Ultimately, we can only talk about Arsenal because obviously that's who we watch every week and we see the decisions and whatnot. But I'd be amazed if other Premier League teams don't feel like similar or have the same views as we do. That the refereeing is a shambles. There's no consistency. Decisions are made week by week, and it seems like the opinion and the directive changes on a weekly basis. And then PGMOL will come out and apologise if something's wrong. Then that's pretty much the end of it, the circle of life, in terms of the refereeing decisions. But circling back round to Brighton, disappointing, real shame, because I think when we was 1-0 up, we was looking quite comfortable. I think we was all sort of it was quite early in the second half, that red card, wasn't it? So I think we was all thinking, early goal in the second half, this is game done, and we can see it out. But then the red was what it was, and unfortunately, that was the first of many draws to come, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, controversial game. Ended the month a little bit on a sour note. So we move into September, and at the start of it, obviously there was internationals, and then we made another signing actually. We made a use for our academy, Tommy Setford, who was previously on the Ajax's book, and then we had some good news in that Mikel had signed a new deal, which was for 3 years. I think it's 3 years. He signed the new deal. Good deal, a good move for Arsenal, Joe. That he signed through.
I think so. I think if we hadn't done that at the time, people would have been quite upset. I know there's a few people now saying that Mikel needs to prove himself. The project's gone on too long and all this sort of thing. But at the time, like I said, this is a review of the season. So at the time that he signed that, I don't think anyone would have been against it. I think it would probably been unanimous across the board that everyone was happy for him to get a new deal and continue the project.
Good stuff. And then international break comes and we get more injuries, and they are big ones. So the first one was obviously Ricardo Calafiore came back with a calf injury, and then we got the pretty shattering news that Martin Odegaard, we'd seen the video anyway beforehand. You can't escape it now on Twitter. There are scouts everywhere. It's a virtual scouting system. Martin Odegaard had a pretty severe ankle injury in Norway's game against Austria. And I think, Joe, all of us had the same reaction in that That's massive.
If I remember correctly, was it the picture or a video of him getting onto a plane on crutches and
In
a boot?
crutches, yeah, in the boot.
I think that was the point when a lot of our hearts sank. Because all this stuff, no one watches the Norway games today. Well, I don't anyway. Someone out there might do, but um, yeah, just nice chilled evening on the sofa, not worrying too much about it. Just think, I'll have a little scroll on Twitter before I go and get myself into bed, and then lo and behold, the content and the page is filled with pictures of Martin Odegaard in a boot, hobbling off, and him being absolutely clattered. And yeah, unfortunately, mate, that was looking back at it now, you could say that was a huge point in the season. I think we knew at the time it was going to be, but I don't know about you, but it's probably even bigger now than I thought at the time.
I think it was, and I think we all know the reason. Martin Odegaard, has been a fabulous player for us, but we didn't have a like-for-like replacement. No one could see who, Fabio Vieira had gone, Emil Smith-Rowe had gone, Ethan Wanieri, there was talk of him, but, Martin Odegaard has been a significant piece of the Arsenal, first team for a long time. He's the captain as well. And for me personally, I think, like most fans, I didn't see how are you going to reshuffle to have someone who has the same influence as him. I mean, Joe, what did you think? Obviously we talked about he's in the boot and everything, but were you like me? You thought, look, there's no one a like for like replacement. How are we going to create goals? How are we going to create chances? The metronome was effectively gone.
Well, yeah, this was the thing, wasn't it? I mean, Smith Rowe we'd let go, Vieira we'd let go, and they were the two options we had to bring into that position. Ethan, obviously, we had sort of high hopes for, but I don't think anyone really expected him to come in and be able to carry the burden. Because if I remember, it was Spurs away, wasn't it? The first game back.
Yeah. So great way to come back when you've got a major injury.
So I mean, I think, well, yeah, across the next few games were Spurs and City, weren't they? Across, I think,
Spurs.
were our
So we
first
have
few games
Spurs
back
away to
after
Atalanta,
that. So
City. Then we had City, and then obviously we started the Carabao Cup campaign. So why don't we talk about?
So to expect 70? Sorry, mate. Just to expect Ethan to come in and produce Martin Odegaard level numbers, I think it's just unrealistic, isn't it? So yeah, it was a massive blow. And like you said, mate, we didn't have anyone who could pick up that burden, and that was worrying.
Okay. So then we do go into September. As you said, the first game was Spurs away, always a tough one. And then we had the Champions League started where we went to Atalanta away, 0-0 there. Sorry, 1-0. We won obviously at Spurs with a goal from Gabriel, so 1-0 to us. Then we had the City game, which was, contentious, and we'll talk about that one. That ended up being 2-2. We then started our Carabao Cup campaign with, at home to Bolton. And then we played Leicester City at home, and that ended our September. So let's go into each one. Spurs away. No Martin Odegaard. The North London derby is always a heated hotbed. This game actually was a different kind of. We played very defensive. We allowed Spurs to really come at us, and we put in a very defensive. It was a deep block game, and then obviously we got the goal through what came to be one of our biggest strengths of the season, which is our set pieces. How did you view the game, Joe?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it, mate. I think at that stage in the season, we were, well, us as fans and possibly opposition thought you don't score against Arsenal. We was in that kind of defensive, yeah, you know what, we don't concede goals. So we don't give anything away. Obviously, we had Gabby and Saliba picking up where they left off from the previous season. We're looking very tidy at the back. David Raya in goal, obviously, was looking strong. And just as a defensive unit, we weren't going to concede goals. We was just shutting teams out with ease. So I think to go to Spurs and have the confidence in ourselves to go, do you know what? We'll nick a one goal. We can score a set piece, and you ain't scoring against us. So I was very happy with that, mate. I think it showed a new side to Arsenal, um, rather than obviously the free flowing attacking football that we're all used to seeing with the Arsenal. To go there and be able to put on, you could say, what, a Mourinho-esque type performance of just
Yeah.
park the bus, nick a goal, and we'll get out of here. Thanks. We'll take the 3 points. See you later. Yeah, I was really happy with that performance, mate, and I was actually more excited probably seeing us able to do that so comfortably, more than I would have been if we'd been there and played them off the park. Obviously, we
Okay.
weren't to know how bad, sorry, they was going to be at the time.
Yeah,
But
but
a
at that
1-0
point they
win
were
away
they
at
were.
Spurs is still.
I mean, they started the season quite strongly, and then obviously fell off massively. But we're not here to talk about that lot. There's no need to really.
They haven't done anything relevant, have they, recently? So
You think they have the way they're going about it.
no.
We then started our Champions League campaign. So obviously we've got the new format of the Champions League, which is more of a league based for most of it, and then it gets very confusing as to how they order the knockout rounds. But we'll go into that later on. So we started off away at Atalanta, and ended up. It was a tough game, really tough game. 0-0 in the end. How do you think we started our Champions League campaign? Atalanta, no mugs. I mean, they'd won the Europa League the year before, so it's not exactly
Yeah,
like they're
mate. I
mugs.
think again. I think that was another. Was it David Raya save? Did he have double save in that game as
Raya
well?
was unbelievable that night.
Yeah, you sort of the theme of the season started there for him, didn't it? Really, in the opening few months, it was sensational. But no shame in going away to Atlanta. Like you said, won the European trophy the year before. Sort of widely known to be a difficult outfit to play. So no, I was fairly happy with that. I mean, to go away in Europe, the general rule over the years has been, hasn't it, win your home games and don't lose away, and you'll be in good stead for the knockout rounds. And that's essentially, I know there's a new format now, but I still think if you go by that, you'll be in good stead for the sort of getting into the latter phases of competition, which it turned out we did.
Then, obviously, we get to the very interesting game that was Man City away at 2-2. Right, I'm going to run through the events quickly, and then we're going to talk about, obviously, the controversy and then everything that happened. Right, Erling Haaland scored first, and we thought that was it. It's good. They're absolutely going to fly out. However, we came back with an absolute beautiful debut goal from Riccardo Calafiori. We'll talk about it in a minute. Then we actually took the lead through Gabriel, another set piece. But then, in the final minute of the first half, Trossard, very silly, kicked the ball away after like a second after after the restart apparently. And what happened? Second yellow card, sent off. Completely changed the game. Mike Oliver, PGMOL again. We'd already been quite vociferous after the Brighton game, and this did not help our mental state. And it was later calculated that it was just 0.84 seconds between Oliver's whistle and Trossard kicking the ball away.
This is why I love the Arsenal fan base. Only we would go into that sort of, it's been 0.84 seconds between the whistle blowing and the ball being kicked. Our fan base is elite, mate, when it comes to this level
it gets even worse,
housery.
But this is what gets even worse. So we battled half with 10 men for a full half against Man City. That is unreal. But then 8 minutes of injury time, and then into the 8th minute of stoppage time, John Stones equalises. I mean, again, we honestly thought we'd done it. We had done pretty much not the impossible, but the unthinkable, which is to go to City, 10 men for 45 minutes, and an absolute defensive masterclass, and then 8 minutes of injury time, and then they score. I mean, Joe, let's talk about the red card first. I can't see how this was justified. I think this was just so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this one. It's hard to say, isn't it? Because on first viewing, it did look like he kicked the ball away from the angle on the Sky footage. It looked like Trossard's just yeeted the ball as far away as he can. But then when they've done sort of the zoomed out picture, you see that he's actually sort of hooked it towards Martinelli, who's steaming forward into acres of space. So yeah, at first I thought it was all on Trossard. I thought, what have you done? You've killed us. But looking back at it after, again, was it another harsh one? For me, the Declan Rice one was harsher than the Trossard one, I think. Um, I think there's more of a case, or the referee could probably make more of a case for the kicking the ball away in regards to the Trossard one. However, it is Michael Oliver. I'm sure we'll go into it later, but there was an incident, I believe, that was Michael Oliver at Wolves being involved in while Lewis Skelly. Clearly, we're very popular with him. So, yeah, it's hard not to think that there is maybe something a little bit bigger at play than just decision making on the pitch.
And obviously, it's just so disappointing to come away with a 2-2 after you'd battled for so long and literally the last minute of the game.
Yeah, I mean, we defended brilliantly, didn't we, from memory? I think, like I said, it was back, I think before half time, I think we was looking quite comfortable. I think we was in the ascendancy. Could argue half time came at a bad time for us, really.
Well, it came at a really bad time with that red card.
Yeah, but yeah, we was looking in control, and we was ahead of City at the Etihad for the first time in what feels like eternity. So yeah, to lose Trossard on half time was a nightmare scenario. But the further we went in that second half, you was thinking, do you know what? Defensively, again, we're doing well. City weren't having. It wasn't sort of backs to the wall, was it? Well, I mean, we was just quite content with. Okay, we'll sit in, not give them any space. They can have the ball around the box, not a problem. And we're fairly comfortable with that, which we were. But yeah, like we said, unfortunately, last minute goal, real kick in the teeth, unfortunately, because that would have been a really big result, I think, if we'd got that win away at City with Trossard, Odegaard being injured, obviously going down to 10 men away at the Etihad. Yeah, 2-1 could have been a massive result for us, but unfortunately it wasn't to be, thanks to Mr. Stones.
But I will say that goal from Ricardo Calafiori was unbelievable.
Oh, yes.
He only scores bangers, doesn't he? He doesn't score.
He does, mate.
Doesn't.
A bit like Thomas Partey, only scores from about 30 yards, doesn't he?
I know. We then started our Carabao Cup campaign. And I'm just talking about this because obviously Ethan Nwaneri made his full debut for us, scored 2 goals, and then obviously Raheem Sterling scored. You know, Ethan Nwaneri, we knew what he was. We already knew that he was going to be jumping up to the first team. But obviously, to see his talent, it's crazy. What did you make of, obviously of, his debut?
Yeah, that was very exciting, wasn't it? I think that game we was thinking, do you know what, maybe he can do a job in Odegaard's absence. Maybe he can, obviously not replace Odegaard, but could he stand in and do a job for us while he was out? Possibly. But yeah, he was outstanding, wasn't he? I know obviously it's lower league opposition, but he just looked devastated with that trademark finish of his, just cutting into his left foot and just ball going top bins. It's like effortless with him, which is so exciting and so much potential. And we'll probably touch on it later, mate, but he went on, I think, to have actually a really good season. Didn't feature as much in the back half as I would have liked, or I think as anyone would have liked. Probably like to see him used a bit more. Don't know whether that came down to maybe too much physicality for him, being 17, 18. Was it a bit too much for him, not quite ready to play the 90 minutes yet? More of sort of like an hour player. Who knows? But no, really positive season for him. And that was, yeah, all from there was a really exciting start and kind of propelled him on to have quite a good little spell in the side,
yeah, I think so. I'm going to rattle through the other games in September. So we played Leicester. That was a 4-2. The only thing about this was that they scored 2, which was, I don't know how they did this at home. But yeah, again, James Justin's goals, amazing. But we should have won this anyway, shouldn't we, Joe?
Yeah, 100%, mate. That one. I remember that James Justin half volley worldie, wasn't it?
How do we get people scoring the worldies against us?
Oh no, mate. We either get people scoring worldies against us or goalkeepers having the game of their lives.
Yeah,
It's usually one or the other.
unbelievable. Right, we're going to go into October. Back to the Champions League, and we hosted Paris Saint-Germain, which we won, and we won. You know, considering that they're the Champions League winners, we beat them 2-0. But we'll go into that game in a minute. We then played newly promoted Southampton, and we beat them 3-1. And then the rest of the games were Bournemouth away, which we're going to talk about because there's a controversy there as well. And then we played Shakhtar Donetsk at home, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was at home. And then we had the game against Liverpool. We also played Preston North End in the Carabao Cup. So let's go through them chronologically. I'm going to skip over the games that didn't really have too much in them. Paris Saint-Germain, winners of the Champions League, and at home we 2-0. I think didn't tell the story of how much we dominated that game. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think we can take solace in the fact that PSG, who we played in October, are very different to the PSG who just trounced Inter Milan in the final. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just
What ifs? It's the what ifs, isn't it, Joe?
It is, mate. Anyway, right. Back on task. So, no, played really well. I think that was the first game where we thought, wow, we look good. Because we were just all over PSG. I mean, we didn't give them a sniff really in that game. It looked outstanding, really good win, and lots to be positive about following that result, mate. I don't know about you, but I think the general consensus from around where I was sitting was we could, judging this performance, we could go far in this competition. I think that was quite a statement win for us.
Yeah, it's a statement win, and it propelled us on. Given that we drew 0-0, it wasn't an untoward victory. I thought we played so well. It wasn't like PSG were bad at that point. They weren't great, but they weren't bad. Joe, do you want to just talk? So obviously we beat Southampton. Then we're going to get to Bournemouth game. Bournemouth game, again, poor refereeing decision. You know, in the 30th minute we lose Saliba, and we lose 2-0. Do you want to just talk about the game?
Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll speak about the Liverpool one, and then as well because that will tie in quite nicely.
Sure.
If you're happy. So,
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so Bournemouth, obviously, difficult place to go. Bournemouth were having a good season. Likes of Semenyo, Kerekes, Cliver, good outfit, but I still think that we should have gone there and beat them. I think we was all thinking we should win this game. Again, we come to another red card where we seem to be the only team who suffered with this kind of decision, if you like, because I believe it might have been a Spurs game, maybe on the same weekend or the following weekend, where there was an identical incident which didn't receive the same punishment that we did. Again, no problems with Saliba getting a red card if there is a consistency of officiating across all games. But again, that doesn't happen. It appeared that only we suffered as a result of this last man on the halfway line rule. But
because it's not the early red. Just to touch on that, Joe, it hasn't been the only instance of the last player back and pulling the player back. Saliba was a naughty boy. We can all agree on that. But there have been numerous instances this season where it hasn't led to a red card. It only seemed that Saliba's one led to the red card.
But this is the frustrating thing, isn't it, mate? It's that, like we said, consistency. That's all we want. If all of them incidents leads to red cards across the season, then no one's making a bone about it. But it's frustrating because we obviously received a red card for that, which, okay, fine, not a problem. But be consistent. In other games, make sure that other people are receiving the same treatment that we're getting. And it just felt very much like that wasn't the case for a lot of last season, unfortunately.
And then the Liverpool game?
Liverpool again. Played well, didn't we? I mean, we looked really sharp in this game, I think. We obviously took the lead. went 2-1 ahead. I think there's another. I'm not sure if I can't remember now whether it was at 2-1 or 2-2, but there was a questionable VAR decision where we had a goal disallowed. Might have been VAR, but or Anthony
Oh
Taylor
no, it
was
was
it the
Kiwi
ref?
at the end. At the end, you know
I'm
where?
thinking of where they got sort of bundled into the net, didn't it? But
Yeah,
Anthony Taylor had blown up against Havertz
yeah. It was the
for
last minute, so it was at 2-2, and then we
yeah,
scored. You know, Kai
yes,
Havertz had nicked it on to Kvyat, and Kvyat had just steamed in.
yeah,
But they thought, you know, again, they thought it was a foul, and it was a foul by
strange.
Kvyat, which was
And again, mate, I think that game, I think obviously more injuries. Gabriel and I think Timber both went off injured in
yeah,
that game. So if I'm not mistaken, we finished with Lewis Skelly, Kivior, Ben White,
right,
and Thomas Partey at right
yeah,
back.
exactly. So we weren't exact.
So, mate, I think if without those injuries, again, I think that's another game where I would have fancied us to see it out and win. Um, but yeah, finishing with that back four, I think it was probably one of Lewis Skelly's first games in the team. Jakub Kivior obviously probably hadn't played much up to that point. Thomas Partey at right back's always questionable for me, although he was better this year. And Ben White's had a bit of an injury-ravaged season. So, yeah, it was a back four that was, yeah, all over the place, unfortunately. But, yeah, without their injuries, mate, I think that's another one we could have won, probably would have gone on to win. Don't know what you think.
I think so. Again, our performance against the top six has been unbelievable for the last couple of years, and I think again, Liverpool, the champions, and we have to hold our hand up. They were the best team by a mile. But in this game, we made them look ordinary. And then obviously, it comes down to inconsistencies, I think. The
Yeah,
injuries, which we do to ourselves, you know, and then inconsistent refereeing. It's a shame, but this is the running theme which we're going to see throughout this season. We also had the Champions League game where we had Shakhtar Donetsk. We beat that, you know, which we won 1-0. I think that was a pretty standard game. You know, again, we've had these games. We had these games in this year's Champions League where we just not ground out, but we took the lead and we were comfortable.
minimal effort, wasn't it?
Again, I don't mind that. That's how you get through the
No,
group stages, because we
exactly.
all know during this first part of the season, everyone's a bit groggy. They're not quite up to the sharpness and they're still
Yeah,
finding their feet. So, do you know what? I don't mind it at all. We also had then our game against Preston North End. Again, Ether Wanyeri scoring again, but also Gabriel Jesus scoring, which was a big one. And it led to a mini renaissance of Gabriel Jesus. Would mini renaissance be the right word for it?
yeah. I mean, was that about the time when he decided to just start scoring hundreds of goals against Crystal Palace? Was that at that point in the season, roughly?
That's all.
Um, yeah, he'd been struggling up until then, hadn't he? And then he obviously got that goal, and then a few games later we had the massacre of Crystal Palace by Gabriel Jesus,
Yeah.
and it was actually really nice that he had that spell, mate, because obviously he'd been struggling. Lots of people saying obviously he's not good enough anymore. We've moved on from him, and like I said, I still like to remember the Jesus that transformed our front line. So for me to see him come back, score them goals, obviously hat trick against Palace, then got another two. Did he at Selhurst Park or one? I think.
Yeah.
You can give us the full breakdown of stats there, mate. But no, it was nice to see, and yeah, I think I was really chuffed for him. It was really nice just to see him getting some goals. I think everyone was, in fairness. I think the
Yeah.
entire fan base would have liked that.
Yeah. It was nice to see him start scoring and have a bit of a smile on his face. It's been a couple of torrid injuries for Gabriel Jesus. Getting into November, we go to Newcastle away. We lose that 1-0. We then played Inter Milan in the San Siro, and we lose there again. We then go to play Chelsea away, and we get a 1-1 draw there. Then we have our home game against Nottingham Forest, and we win that 2-0. We then play Sporting Lisbon, and we win that pretty comfortably. In the champion, beating them 5-1. And this is a side with one of our big targets, which we'll talk about again some other time, in Victor Gyökeres. We then played West Ham, winning 5-2. And really, it was a bit of a mixed bag for November in that we had a couple of losses, but then we started to get some very big wins. Joe, let's rewind a little bit. Newcastle United away is always a tough one, and Alexander Isak should be one of the players up for player of the season. I know Mo Salah will win it because he's been unbelievable, but Alex Isak is probably second on that list because he's been unbelievable. And we do struggle against Newcastle, don't we? It seems to be that it's a real.
My overriding memory of that game, was just how poor we were. I don't really remember us creating anything in that game, and I think this was when we was really in the pits of the Martin Odegaard injury. Really struggling to create anything. Yeah, I mean, like I said, mate, I don't really have much memory of that game other than just how poor we were. And I think the loss was pretty well deserved on our behalf in the end. Going into Chelsea, there's another frustrating performance, I think. Was it Martinelli get our goal in that one, I think? And then we went 1-0 up, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, Martinelli scored it, and then Pedro Neto equalised.
Yeah, and that was the game where Martin Odegaard came back, was it, I think? Did he return for Chelsea and ended up playing 90 minutes?
He played 90 minutes, didn't he? Which
in hindsight looks quite questionable now because he hasn't looked like he's recovered all year to me.
Yeah.
But again, another frustrating one, I think. But you kind of accepted the result because you're right. Odegaard's back. We'll kick on now. We've not suffered too much. There's been a few obviously drop points along the way, but Odegaard's back and we're now ready to crack on.
Yeah. And then Inter Milan. So again, another finalist. We played both Champions League finalists. Again, defensive issues, creativity issues, and we went to the San Siro and we lost 1-0. I still think that game, we didn't play that badly. I think Inter Milan obviously were very much the better team. But in the second half, I didn't think we were bad at all. I think 1-0 is a fair reflection, but I think we at least showed that we can go to one of the big teams and still put in a performance. It's not great, and I think our issues and our injuries compounded that. But it's crazy that we've played both finalists of the Champions League, and I don't think we've looked at all like the worst team out of those two.
No, we've not looked out of place in either of them, have we? I mean, the Inter game was disappointing, wasn't it? It was a 1-0 loss to a penalty.
But they were the better team, weren't they? They were the better team.
Yeah, there weren't too many complaints again with that result, I don't think. Again, I think the big frustration was just how toothless we looked. So yeah, again, that little spell, we was, from memory, just really struggling to create anything. And I think, did that lead then into the Fulham away as well, I think? That may have came shortly after.
Was it Fulham away? I'm trying to remember.
While you check the fixtures, I think Fulham away was around that time when we had the late goal. Martinelli was just offside, and VAR ruled it out. I think that was around a similar period because again we went away to Fulham and didn't create an awful lot.
No, Fulham. I'm double checking. I think no, that was later on. So our next game was after Chelsea was against Nottingham Forest 3-0. So you had Saka, Partey, and Wanyeri again scoring another class goal. Nottingham Forest. Look, I think Forest were the story of the season in that everyone pegged them for mid-table relegation.
But they had an outstanding season, didn't they?
Yeah, but to get so close to the Champions League and then just fall off at the end, I think there's no shame in it. It's disappointing. If I was a fan, I would be gutted. But you're playing.
But for them to even get Europa League.
Well, they're the conference, aren't they, next year?
They're conference.
They're conference.
Okay, well, never mind.
You don't
Better
change
next year, Forest. I was trying to find an air of positivity for them. Yeah,
but they'll win it probably. They'll probably win it, won't they? Because the level of competition in the conference league is so poor.
Yeah, should have a good chance of going far in it, definitely.
And then we get to Sporting Lisbon away. Sporting Lisbon, if you look at compilations, are amazing because Vicar Gyökeres scores pretty much every game and scores multiple goals. But we went there and absolutely destroyed them, I think is the word that we could. It was from start to finish a destruction. We had Martinelli, Havertz, Gabriel, Saka with a penalty, and Trossard. They got one back through Gonzalo Ignacio. Total destruction. What a game that was.
Yeah, it was outstanding, mate. I think we were suited, weren't we, for the European football around that time?
Yeah, because
I think a lot.
we were defensively solid. We didn't have much creativity, but against the teams that open up against us, we will absolutely destroy them.
I think the Premier League teams were more savvy and realised that if you can frustrate Arsenal, there is a chance to nick a goal and they'll struggle to get back. Whereas in Europe, I think teams feel, well, fans almost demand, don't they, for your home games in Europe, that you go and you take the initiative and you dictate the game.
Yeah.
Which played into our hands, really. Obviously allowed our creative players more space. I think Timber was outstanding in that game. Calafiori obviously came on, didn't he? Oh, no,
Yep.
sorry, I'm mixing up. No. I'm thinking of, is it PSV?
PSV, yeah, PSV, yeah. This is another destruction. We'll go into that. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But it again, it was a positive result after, we'd started to get a bit of positivity after, what was a start, quite a hard start to November. And then obviously we got to West Ham, and that was a funny game because obviously we were dominant and we went 4-0 up, didn't we? And then they got 2 back, and you're starting to go, oh God, please don't let this happen. Then obviously we settled down, and Saka got the last goal, the 5th goal in the 45th and added time. I mean, again, another strong result, but there are just a few worrying signs in that we have these brain fart moments, I call them, where we just switch off, don't we?
Yeah, defensively, you were starting to see a few blips, weren't you?
Yeah.
Which we hadn't shown, I think, from the back end of the previous season and at the start in the first few months of the Premier League season. We looked really solid defensively again. And that was the first time, really, you start to think, okay, we're conceding a few silly goals now. There's starting to be a bit of a theme developing. And like you said, mate, that was a bit of a worry at that point.
Yeah. Then we get to December. We play Man United at home, beating them 2-0. We get to the Fulham game, which you did mention before, and that's a 1-1. We then play Monaco at home, 3-0, which was another good result in Europe. Then we get to a very disappointing game in my eyes, which was the Everton game, ended 0-0. And really, again, a bit of a story of the season. And then we play Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup, winning 3-2. We then play Crystal Palace again in the Premier League, beat them 5-1. And then we end the month playing Ipswich on the day after Boxing Day. I mean, Joe, on the whole, mostly it was a good a month of good results. The disappointment, I think, for us was the Fulham and Everton games. So let's just touch on those ones. Fulham, we go down to an early Raul Jimenez goal, which was another brain fart moment, I find, in that we didn't cover Raul Jimenez well enough, and then they get a very good goal. Raul Jimenez is a very good striker. But it's just frustrating. It's more frustrating because, again, it took us so long to get back to a 1-1, and we really didn't do enough, I don't think.
No, like you said, mate, we got the 1-1 fairly early in the second half.
Yeah, 51 minutes. We had plenty of time.
We had plenty of time to do it, but again, we never really. We got that goal, and I thought, right, let's go now. Let's really push up. Yeah. But we never really did, from memory.
We did, but then the thing is obviously we scored a goal. We did score again. We scored a second. Disallowed because Martinelli was offside in the build-up. We were like, Martinelli, come on.
Yeah, this is when we all decided that Martinelli being the width of a toenail offside was enough to absolutely coat him. And
we do that. Arsenal fans love to do it to any player.
A nice rational sort of approach to a minimal offside decision.
Yes.
But no, again, it was another frustrating moment and another what-if moment, wasn't it? Which we seem to be mentioning quite a lot, I would suggest, in this sort of season review in the first half. There's been a lot of instances of decisions or moments, fine margins that have cost us. And again, this is just another one that goes on the list, isn't it?
That's what you could call our DVD of the season. Just what-ifs, decisions, and fine margins.
Yeah. Fine margins FC.
Fine margins FC. The Monaco game, I want to go and touch on the Monaco game for a couple of reasons, because it was a fabulous result, 3-0. But also as well, the debut, the Champions League debut for Miles Lewis-Skelly. And I want to touch on him because we didn't when he made his debut against City, because again at City he came on in quite late and obviously had a bit of a controversial moment with Erling Haaland, where Erling Haaland asked, "Who are you?" And then obviously Miles did tell him later on who he was. But Miles Lewis Skelly is what a phenomenal season he's had, Miles Lewis Skelly, correct?
Yeah, mate. I mean, right at the start of the podcast, obviously, when we discussed David Raya, I said he was a contender for player of the season. Miles Lewis Skelly would be another one. Has absolutely blown me away with how good he has been, considering his age, considering the circumstances with which he came into the team. Gone on to score on his England debut. I mean, from being a prospect at the start of the year, he's now gone on to be Arsenal's first choice left back and arguably England's first choice left back.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
By the end of his first season, which
think
it's wild, isn't it?
It's crazy to think how a midfielder has been converted into the starting left back for one of the biggest clubs in the Premier League and for the national side. It just again, we'll go into it. We will go into it in another podcast. I think we'll save it for another one to to really go into how good Miles Lewis Skelly is. But it was just crazy that an 18-year-old was starting the Champions League against Monaco. Monaco are no slouches.
No,
but it was. He
just looked so comfortable in that environment as well.
Yeah.
I think this was what struck everyone. Everyone knows that he had the ability, but for him to just slot in there so seamlessly and look like he'd been playing there for 20 years, it was quite something, mate.
Yeah,
quite something.
I'm going to talk about not the Palace Carabao Cup game, because that, I think, that was fine. That was a decent win again, good for our momentum. The Palace away game in where we played. Was it away? I'm just double checking. Sorry. Palace away, yeah, 5-1. Gabriel Jesus back on the mini renaissance with 2 goals. I thought, wow, okay, Gabriel Jesus is back. We've got him back. He's really going for it. How did you feel? Obviously he had scored in a couple of games, and then obviously 2 in this one, and we thought that's it. He's going to be, he's going to be the striker that we haven't had for a while.
Just shows you, mate, doesn't it, that how important confidence is for a centre forward, probably more so than any other position, possibly.
Yeah.
Just obviously you got the hat trick against Palace in the cup. Goes away to Palace a few weeks later and scores another couple of goals. One of them, if I remember, was actually the first goal he scored? He put us 1-0 up, did he?
Yeah, he put us 1 up
with a very good finish as well.
Yeah.
At the keeper's near post. Just pure confidence, mate. He's got the ability. We know that. Doesn't shoot or occupy those sort of centre forward spaces anywhere near as much as we would have liked him to. But it just showed you when he is in front of goal, he has got the ability to finish.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustrating thing with that has dogged Gabriel Jesus, even when he is fit. He's got all the ability in the world. We have seen him score worldies, ordinary goals, but he just seems to lack the consistency when he's in the box, and I think that's the frustration.
He himself, hasn't he? He did a interview for, was it Brazil, when he said, "I'm not a striker," didn't he? Which, if you're a goal scorer, I mean, if you compare that to Ian Wright, who is he's all about the goals, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
That is his currency is goals. It's just chalk and cheese, and that's, I think, if you've got a centre forward, that's what you need, someone with that Ian Wright mindset rather than a Gabriel Jesus overall team mindset, I suggest.
The biggest issue, I think, from November, unfortunately, was from December. Sorry, was we got the news that Bukayo Saka would be out for a very lengthy period after the Crystal Palace game for his hamstring. This would become a theme through the season, as we'll find out. This was after Martin Odegaard's one. We thought, okay, we're getting back to it. But then this was humongous because the timeline predicted was, 4 to 5 months?
This was the killer, wasn't it? I think this was the point when we all thought
he'd been on such a good run.
That could be our season over, because he was Mo Salah levels, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, he'd had, even it was about what 10 or so 10 or so assists,
Mm,
5 goals, 5 or 6 goals. He was on par. Not necessarily goal wise. Mo Salah was a goal machine, but as being the main man, yeah,
mm.
it,
Yeah, I'm sure around that sort of time, just before his injury, him and Mo Salah, in terms of their goal contributions,
we're
were
equal.
fairly similar numbers. And obviously, you went on to see what Mo Salah's numbers did for Liverpool. Again, another case of what if Saka had been fully fit the whole year, would he have kept it up? Would he have surpassed the numbers he's got? Because every year he's been in the side, I think his numbers have gone up. He's always been on an upward trajectory for his goal contributions, and again, this one he was on pace to do that again. Obviously, the injury curtailed that, but yeah, that was. I think that was the point in the season for me personally where I started to think, right, this isn't going to be our year. We're
Yeah,
struggling.
I think the problem was that as soon as we got that injury, given the form he was in, given what he was actually pretty central to what we were doing, it was hard not to notice that he was pretty central. 5 months, 4 to 5 months, everyone thought that's it. I think everyone had the same inkling, but
Mm,
also as well, I think all fans thought, okay, we're going to have to go into the transfer window.
mm,
You know, I don't know about you, Joe, but I just thought if we don't buy someone in the transfer window, we really are shooting ourselves in the foot
yeah.
if we want to take.
At that point, we were seeing Mikel's 13-man squad again, weren't we?
Yes.
We did, the one stick you can hit him with is that lack of squad rotation.
Yeah, faith in the squad,
Unfortunately, but
faith in him rotate. His player his reserve players.
yeah, around this time we was going into the 13-man squad orbit, if you like, and yeah, it was just it's really disappointing, mate, because like we said, the numbers that he was putting up, he was on course to have a Thierry Henry-esque season. That it was at that level of performance, and he was outstanding for us. So to lose him, yeah, we thought maybe Martinelli and Trossard could sort of dovetail and maybe do jobs for us, but during that time he was injured, you saw just how important he is for us and how good a player he is.
Yeah, it's devastating. We then ended the year with a 1-0 win over Ipswich. I think again we should be beating Ipswich, and I think if we hadn't, I think we'd be pretty annoyed at how we go about things. So we then go to January. Oh, January. Let's talk about the window first, or the lack
Do we
of
have
window.
to?
Yes, because there's nothing that I went into this month thinking, okay, Bukayo Saka's injury meant that we had to start looking in the window. I think, given what happened during the month, I think it only exacerbated it even more because then Gabriel Jesus goes down
Mm,
with a season-ending injury. So I thought that's it. Definitely have to get a striker. But we didn't sign anybody. No news, no incomings at all, nothing. How did you view? I thought personally it was a complete. It wasn't good. I thought this is actually negligent on the club's part in terms of
mm,
you are challenging for the Premier League. Even with the injury, you've still got a squad that can challenge. And we didn't do what we had to do to ensure that we could keep challenging. And
yeah,
it came to bite us so badly afterwards because obviously,
yeah. The silence was deafening, wasn't it, throughout January? I mean, like you said, to lose Jesus in the United game while Saka was already out left us hopelessly short. Um, we'd semi shot ourselves in the foot with the loan of Sterling and Neto. Obviously, we couldn't bring anyone in on loan because we had the two already. The Sterling signing by this point was revealing itself for what it was, which was an absolute car crash. Even with the Saka injury, people thought, okay, maybe Sterling, now it's time to step up. It never happened. An argument can be made, I think, to say you don't panic buy, because we've done plenty of that over the years. You don't go and throw money at people who you don't want as a short-term fix. However, given that we were looking to challenge for a Premier League, a Champions League, at the time an FA Cup, not to do any business, like you said, Matt, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the word negligent. Ultimately, that is probably what cost us in the end. Across so many games, having a lot of chances, not taking them.
Why?
Obviously,
Why did we not do any? But you just mentioned, obviously, we've, you know, we don't do, these kind of short-term fixes or these, reaction knee-jerk transfers. But surely, as a good club, you'd have a plan in place to say we pivot to these people, we pivot to these people. If something happens. Saka's injury, one, okay, that started to get the thinking going that we may, Jesus going down should have been like the alarm bells are going off. You need somebody because your only fit striker is Kai Havertz. So what do you think the thinking was, Joe? Are we talking about there's no players around, which I can't believe. If we're so rigid, then we've got problems in terms of how we pool our scout of players. B, PSR. I know PSR is still within the thoughts, and given what happened to Everton and Nottingham Forest around the same time, I think it just exacerbated the thoughts about PSR issues. But this just seemed really negligent. I come back to the word negligent around not aiding our Premier League title charge.
Again, mate, another point that might be worth a mention is the Edu situation around that sort of time. Obviously, he went off to join the Marinakis project, if you like, over at Forest and whatever other clubs he's got going for him. Jason Ato, I believe, was sort of interim in charge at the time. Makes you wonder what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, if Edu knew that he was going, did he sort of drop the ball? Did he kind of lose interest in what Arsenal were doing? Obviously, he's got his eyes on other things. Jason Ato, obviously, as an interim, sort of Edu's right-hand man by the signs of it,
he was
during Edu's time there.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't ready or wasn't in a position to step up at that time. All ifs and buts, mate. I mean, it's all guesswork from obviously us from the outside looking in. But knowing what we do now, I can't help but think that would have played a quite significant role. But again, as you've mentioned, mate, not to have obviously the plan A's by the sounds of it are your Sescos and your Gyökereses. I get that they probably weren't attainable in January. However, I would like to think that there would have been some sort of plan B. I mean, you could have started looking when Saka got injured, realistically.
The big one was obviously Ollie Watkins. So Ollie Watkins, the story goes that obviously Aston Villa have PSR issues. They've got two good strikers on the books in Ollie Watkins and John Duran. They would have to shift one of them on. At the start of the month, from what I understand, we were offered Ollie Watkins for 60 million and we came back with 40 million, which I think actually is an appropriate value. I think 60 million is quite a hefty fee for what he is, and he's a good striker. But then obviously they're trying to sell John Duran to Saudi, which is where he ended up for about 77 million-ish. Should we have pulled the trigger on the Ollie Watkins deal at 60 million? Or do you think that, yeah, it's a good deal, but are we compromising ourselves for, you hope, this summer where we're going to get a striker who is more long-term and more of note?
Yeah, I think ultimately there is that compromise, isn't there? Do you, at the time, I think we was all thinking, are you willing to sacrifice your plan A and drop 60 million on an Ollie Watkins? Villa knew we needed a striker. Everyone knows we needed a striker. So we weren't ever going to get value for money from an Ollie Watkins. We weren't. It was well known how sort of short and in trouble we were. I am not disappointed that we didn't sign Watkins at the time, but looking forward to next season, if we were to now go back in with and again, a 30, 35, 40 million offer for Ollie Watkins and bring him in almost as a backup striker. If we've got the funds, I'm sure we'll do an episode on transfer, so I won't go too much into it. But Ollie Watkins as a plan B, if you can get good value, I'd be more than open to that. But I think at the time, 60 million for him wasn't really getting the minutes in the Villa team. I think he'd been sort of pushed out by John Duran. Obviously, Rashford was there as well. So for him not to be getting into the Villa team, there was a few red flags for me. So no, to answer your question, 60 million for me would have been, I think, too much money, and I think that it would have been a deal that might have compromised our summer. So hopefully we won't be in that position.
That's the hope. Look, we kept the powder dry, as they call it, to hopefully have a good summer. We'll judge it on this summer. We'll talk about that in a further episode. So let's go through the results. We beat Brentford start of the year 3-1. Again, Brian and Mbuemo scored a first few minute goal, and we'll talk about that. Brighton, we get to and we draw 1-1 with Ethan Nwaneri getting a fabulous goal. Then we get to the Carabao Cup, first leg of the semi-final, and we go down 2-0 at home. We'll talk about that one. A little bit disappointing. We then have the FA Cup debacle, which the third round, which ended 1-1, but then Man United win on penalties. We then play Tottenham at home, and we win 2-1. We then have Villa at home, and a disappointing 2-2 result. We then have the Champions League game where we play Dinamo Zagreb. We beat them 3-0. Then we go to Wolves away, win with Calafiori 1-0. And then end the month beating Girona 2-1 in the Champions League. So I'm going to try and rattle through this because I realise we are, we like to talk, but there's a lot to digest here. Brentford, I think we were, good value for the win. I think what's disappointing is that we conceded another early goal and they have, it was one of the things about this season that the low XG chances that they get, that opposition get, they seem to score, which is really annoying with us. And I just think it was a theme that ran throughout the season. Would you agree, Joe?
Yeah, like you said, mate, it's almost we need 10 chances to score. The opposition need 1.
Yeah.
And them numbers are going to catch up with you eventually, aren't they?
Well, it did, didn't it? Unfortunately, it's so annoying. The Brighton game. So Ethan Nwaneri scored, a very good goal, and again, scoring, had a really good vein of form at this point, but then was forced off with an injury, which is, I think, curtailed his season a little bit. Unfortunately, I think he's again, it's been a great season, but I think the injury probably just took the heat off it a little bit. The penalty, the Brighton penalty. This is another example of I've never seen this again, isn't it? Because it was the case that João Pedro flicked the ball in the box. Saliba went to head it away, and he made contact with João Pedro's head in the box. And VAR confirmed it, and they scored an equaliser. We have seen...
This is where I would ask you, Yem. Have you, or anyone who's listening to this, have you ever seen a penalty given for a clash of heads when two people have gone to try and head the ball?
No, and I haven't seen it since. So there's no consistent what ifs and inconsistencies again.
Yes, there you go, mate.
It just feels like every time it's controversial, isn't it? And it leads to us being the victim. I don't want to have the victim mentality, but it doesn't. It's not great when you see the amount of controversies that are associated to us, does it, Joe?
Like we said earlier, I'm sure there's other clubs who will have their own gripes this year, who'll say we was on the receiving end of this decision, that decision. But I feel like we've been on the end of the majority of decisions this year.
I agree.
Which, like you said, 1 or 2 you could maybe handle. But yeah, we must be closing in on 5 or 6 that we've mentioned, and that's just we're only just halfway through the season. So yeah, you're fighting the odds all the time, mate, with that kind of referee.
Yeah, and again, this is part of the problem with our seeing the dropped points in these kind of instances is very frustrating. But I'll keep going on. So we suffered 2-0 at home against Newcastle. we dominated the game, but frustrating, as we've had with Newcastle, we control the ball really well, but we failed to create any chances. And Isak and Gordon score for Newcastle, which is their game plan, their physical side who play the counter, and they do it very well.
Yeah.
But it just showed our lack of creativity and lack of decisiveness in the box, didn't it, Joe?
Yeah, I think we can sum up January quite easily and just say all of our deficiencies were highlighted in January. I think you can say that for the Brighton away game. Again, didn't create many chances there. Newcastle at home, like you said, lots of the ball, but Newcastle had 4 or 5 chances, scored 2 goals. United at home in the FA Cup, again, lots of chances, lots of ball, missed penalty, somehow lost to one of the worst teams I've ever seen in my life. Villa at home in the league, we went 2-0 up and then ended up throwing that away again with just silliness. So yeah, the less said about January, the better, mate. But like I said, all of our deficiencies were on show. The clamour for signings grew louder and louder. The problem we probably had is that other clubs were hearing that clamour and would charge a fee because they knew we were desperate. So all in all, mate, January was just all nightmarish, shall we say? Do you think that's fair, or have I
Nightmarish.
overreacted?
But the only thing was obviously we had the victory against Spurs. Not that's a small thing, but
diamond in the rough.
It was, and it wasn't a great game either. Again, it wasn't like a magical game.
It was a terrible game, that, wasn't it?
It was, but it ended 2-1, and we won that. In the Champions League, we played Zagreb, and again 3-0 didn't flatter us at all. I think we were miles the better side, and we should expect that. But again, it's just showing that in this league format, we do quite well with this kind of against lesser teams, just building, getting the result and not necessarily playing amazingly. We, against Sporting Lisbon, we were amazing, but we weren't like amazing in this one either. I think
the Champions League sort of kept the noise to a minimum, didn't it?
Yeah.
And the Champions League sort of running sort of throughout the league campaign.
Yeah.
Those results that we were getting is what was everyone was clinging on to, and it was like we said, quelling a few loud voices.
And then the Girona game at the end, I think again was just us being very, being professional, except for Pedro Neto, obviously. Sorry, Neto. I keep saying Pedro Neto. It's Neto who decided.
Pedro Neto probably would have done a similar job in goal.
Yes, but that's his job. But obviously he's a midfielder. Neto is not. What was he doing for that?
I mean, genuinely, one of my highlights of the season was watching him trying to save the ball outside the box, as if he was on his line.
You do worry about his goalkeeper credentials when you can't think properly and go, "Hey, I'm outside the box."
Did he have 2 appearances this year? Maybe.
I think one, wasn't it?
Was that the only one? Was it? I mean, yeah.
One and done, because I think Mikel saw that and said, "We haven't got a goalkeeper." Yeah.
That image of him diving across the pitch in sunny Spain is a highlight of the season for me.
The last game I want to talk about in January was the Wolves game. Again, I'm coming back to this with an air of frustration in terms of we won the game. Fantastic. But sending off of Miles Lewis-Skelly, Joe, again, inconsistency, I think is the word I'd use here, because I have no idea, still to this day, as to why it was. And then it was shown actually to be true because it was rescinded. But again, this kind of inconsistency leads to us dropping points. Could have led to us dropping points. We were lucky we won the game. But again, more ifs and controversies.
Inconsistent officiating, but consistent from Michael Oliver is what we could label that as.
Yes.
We won't dwell on it too much, but eventually the correct decision was made and it was rescinded. But again, have you ever seen a player sent off for tripping a player in his own half when there are multiple players back?
But there was
he's at least 80 yards away from goal.
But there was, they got the card rescinded, but that there was no action against Michael Oliver. It's just screams of they're like fingers in the ears and going la 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 la.
They're not accountable to anyone, are they, mate? I mean, we could do a whole episode on refereeing and PGMOL.
Maybe we'll have to.
Yeah, it might be a good therapy session for us and the listeners, mate. But I think just to keep it relatively brief, until they are held accountable by someone and they are not managing themselves and their own entity, these problems will just continue, mate. Because if they're not answerable to anyone, then nothing will change, will it?
Yeah, it won't. Okay, we're moving on. February started off absolutely with a banger. We battered, and this is we haven't done this for a while. We battered Man City at the Emirates 5-1. We'll talk about that game because we have to talk about that game because it was.
Yeah.
We then lost to Newcastle at St James Park in the second leg of the Carabao Cup, and then we beat Leicester 2-0 away. This was also the month where Kai Havertz, we went to Dubai for a couple of days, and that didn't work out this time. Last time it worked miracles, and this time it didn't. We'll talk about it in a second. We then go and lose to West Ham 1-0. We then end the month 0-0 with Forest. Right, let's first talk about the Man City game. What a game, Joe. What a game. You and I are privileged enough to go to the Emirates, and honestly, that day was magical for me. I could.
Yeah, that day is what makes it all worthwhile, isn't it? That Man City result, the Real Madrid game, games like that are what we are lucky enough to pay that money for.
Yeah.
And that is for them moments. It was in that game, it was beautiful. Nothing else mattered. It was literally just the result, and we absolutely destroyed Man City.
That was the thing. It wasn't lucky goals. We absolutely were the better team, and from minute 1 till minute 90, because the goals are spread. Look, Martin Odegaard, the first minute, Thomas Partey in the 56th minute, Lewis Skelly 61st minute, Havertz 75, Ethan Wanyeri 90. We battered them from start to finish, and it was an amazing game. One of the best games I've seen for a while in terms of our overall.
It was so enjoyable, wasn't it? I mean, Miles obviously let Erling Haaland. He made him more than aware of who Miles Lewis Skelly is. Ethan Wanyeri scored a beautiful goal to cap it off. Havertz, his goal was brilliant. We won't mention the one he missed very early in the first half. But no, mate, that's just an outstanding performance. One that will, I think, live long in the memory. Just more reason than anything else being that for a long time we were on the receiving end of those 5-1s, those trouncings quite regularly from Liverpool, City, Chelsea. So we've gone from that to sort of earning respectable draws, maybe the odd loss here and there, but not shaming ourselves. Now, the next progression, we've started winning those games, and hopefully this is the next step up, which is trouncing them. So we owe Liverpool 1. Obviously, we did Chelsea 5-0 at the back end of last year. So Liverpool were last on our hit list, and hopefully that'll be next year, and we confirm ourselves as champions.
Spoiler alert from Joseph. Yeah, look, I'm going to touch on... So Newcastle away, I don't think we competed at all, unfortunately. I think it was just a poor game for us.
We was poor from the get-go.
Yeah. Kai Havertz. So we have a 10-day break and we go off to Dubai, and we get the unfortunate news that Kai Havertz has torn his hamstring in training. I mean, Joe, we talked about the January window and how lack of action was negligent, and the worst fears were confirmed, weren't they? Pretty much, in that our only striker went down with the same injury as Saka. You know, I thought that was it pretty much, wasn't it?
The most frustrating thing about that for me, Yen, was that the warning sign was there at the end of that Wolves game when Havertz
he looked dead, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the Mikel Arteta curse, if you like, we'll call it for now until he does something different, is that he runs players into the ground. And Havertz...
We didn't have anyone else. I mean, Havertz was the only striker.
No, we didn't. You're right, mate. But equally, I know Sterling wasn't ripping up trees. I know Trossard wasn't doing a great deal. Martinelli. No one was particularly in form. But I just feel like there would have been opportunities where even if you give
15 minutes at the end of the game. Just get him off, just rest the legs. All the warning signs were there for Havertz because he does so much running for this team. For that press that we do, he is sensational. He just does not stop working for this team. And seeing how he went down at the end of the Wolves game, I was worried. So for him to be put straight back into the team and play more sort of 90 minutes, that was a concern. But the writing was on the wall, wasn't it? And unfortunately, the worst case scenario transpired.
It seems to be the story of the season that we get the worst case scenario. It's not minor injuries. We're getting massive injuries. And it's, again, we're going to talk about because there's a further one, obviously, that we all know about. So obviously we go to Leicester and it's our brilliant new striker, Mikel Merino, who gets 2 goals. I think, look, again, I think, he scored 2 very good goals, but it was against Leicester. So I think, well, we all had a bit of a laugh, didn't we, in that he's the greatest striker that's ever, that's ever happened. But
like a phoenix rising from the ashes, when he came off that bench at Leicester.
I know, but the thing is, Mikel Merino, look, we gave him stick when he started, and he is a bit, it's taken a bit of time, but became the unsung hero during this run, didn't he, up front?
Absolutely, mate. So I think we may do another episode where we do sort of player ratings for the season, which people can obviously look out for. But for me, Mikel Merino comes out of this season with so much credit because we were in a position of real struggle. There was no one else. Where were the goals going to come from? And he, playing out of position, stepped up to a level that I don't think anyone thought he was capable of. And essentially, across the next few months, in that role as a centre forward, he did save us because he scored. He didn't just chip in with goals once you were 3-0 up, once games were dead. He was scoring important goals. He was scoring the first goal in a 1-0 win. He was scoring, like we said, against Real Madrid, which we'll touch on later, I'm sure. He got another important goal there after, obviously, Declan Rice done what he does. But yeah, for a centre forward to be thrown into that position and for him to produce not only the goals, but the link-up play, how he held it up, how he worked with the likes of your Martinellis, your Sakas, people like that. Obviously, once Saka came back, he comes up with a lot of credit for me this season, and I think without him, our season could have looked catastrophically different.
Okay. We then have our first home loss of the season, I think, in that we lose to West Ham. And the big talking point was obviously Miles Lewis-Skelly getting, initially a yellow card upgraded to a red card. I don't think there was any issues with that, to be honest.
No,
this was one of the
one, I think, the one rare occasion this season where we don't have a gripe.
It was a silly. It was a silly challenge.
David Raya's positioning was different. It could have been a different outcome, but given his location and where that ball was, I think, no complaints from me, and sounds like none from you as well.
No. We end the month going to Nottingham Forest and getting a 0-0. Wasn't a great game, but given the injuries and all that, I think going to Nottingham Forest with flying, I think it was pretty okay. Do you agree, Joe?
Yeah, mate. They were flying at that point in the season. So yeah, going there and getting a draw, obviously not ideal for the slim Premier League hopes that we were still clinging on to. But I think that result, plus the few that you're going to mention coming up, it became, this season's done. Champions League now is what we're going to sort of focus on.
Yeah, so let's shift gears into March, and we will talk about the Champions League now. So the first game in March, 7-1 away at PSV, and we will talk about it. I'm just going to go through the results. We then have a disappointing 1-1 draw with Man United at Old Trafford. We then end our Champions League, in the second round of the round of 16, 2-2 against PSV. But again, we'd beaten them 7-1 in the first leg. And we end the month 1-0 against Chelsea at home at the Emirates. Joe, 7-1. against PSV. Look, we do slander the Dutch league, but they're not exactly slouches. It's not like they're like some unknowns. This is PSV, who are, they had won their league previously, and 7-1 was complete domination. It just seemed every chance we got, we were going to score, wasn't it, in that game?
Again, another sort of rare highlight, if you like, from the season was the ball it flew in, didn't it? We was having the ball, whoever had the chance. I mean, Timber scoring rarely happens. Yeah. Calafiori turned into prime Thierry Henry. Forward, Martin Odegaard had a shot that somehow ended up in the back of the net. It was one of those rare games for us where the chances, everything was going in, wasn't it? And it was, I think, probably the only game really I can remember from the season where there wasn't a glaring miss, and we just seemed to be very,
clinical. Yeah, we were clinical.
You do the big words, yeah, very clinical.
That's what I'm here for. Yeah. You give us the beauty of the game, and I'll come up with the big words. It was a tremendous performance, and actually in the round of 16 to do that, because obviously in the knockout rounds we've tended to be a bit, that's been our biggest weakness in the last couple of years, hasn't it? That when we get to these knockout rounds we struggle. But 7-1, I think that was pretty much, everyone thought it was job done, and it turned out to be that way. Obviously we won 2-2, we drew 2-2 at the Emirates, but we played such a reserve side in that game. A disappointing 1-1 at Rochester United. And I will say that with first-hand experience, because I was at that game. I will say, Old Trafford, I don't know what's happened. It is a dumpster now. Honestly, I've never... the facilities were...
Yeah, I'm not disappointed that I couldn't make that with you, mate, to be honest.
No, I don't. I wouldn't be either. It's honestly...
I'll let you take that one for the team. I'll sit at home on my comfy sofa and just ignore that game.
It doesn't preclude the £20 I spend on food, which was terrible food as well, and some energy drink that I was like, took a swig of, and I was like, what the heck is this?
What food did you have?
What did I had? I had... It wasn't anything hot either. It was like a bag of crisps, it was like, I was amazed. It was like 20 quid, but because you're so hungry, you're like,
you need that money. You are contributing to the payoff
to the Brian and Buemo fund.
The Man United staff who have been laid off, you fund that. So
I know. I look, it is a horror. Look, we like the Man United downfall as much as anybody, but when people are losing their jobs, no one likes that, do they?
That is a catastrophe at that club, isn't it? For a club of, I mean, like we said, we are not going to be saying anything positive about Man United, really, but they are one of the biggest clubs in the world, a football institution, and to see them on the pitch struggling is a thing of beauty. But all the noise around it and what's going on at a sort of a behind-the-scenes club level is, disgusting, really.
I'm not going to delve too much into this game. I just thought it was such a poor game from us. Again, lack of chances. And then we have the PSG. And then we end the month with a 1-0 win against Chelsea. Look, I think Chelsea a bit, off and on. And again, I think it was just a ground out win that we did well to win at. Into April, we get a 2-1 win against Fulham. Fairly comprehensive, I think, but we can talk about another disappointing draw with Everton. And Everton, again, they seem to be in the bane of our season. Then we get to, obviously, one of the highlights of the season, the 3-0 win against Real Madrid in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And we will definitely talk about that game. And the subsequent return leg where we beat Real Madrid 2-1 in the Bernabeu. The remontada never actually appeared. Real Madrid at the Bernabeu is different. Not really, but...
No difference whatsoever.
No difference whatsoever. We have a draw with Brentford. I'm going to delve into the Real Madrid game. Needs a little bit of time on itself, so we'll go into that. Brentford drew 1-1, disappointing again. We then had an away game against Ipswich 4-0. We then played Crystal Palace again, where we're looking towards the Champions League semi-finals. That's a 2-0. We then end the month with a disappointing 1-0 against PSG, who would go on to win the finals. Joe, the highlight obviously is the Champions League game against Real Madrid, both legs. Let's start with the first leg. 3-0, I don't think was unjustified, was it? I think Real Madrid did well in the first few minutes, but then we started to assert ourselves in the game. I don't think we were creating a massive amount, but then Declan Rice decides to show us his free kick skills, which he hasn't shown us. Why has he not? With two absolute worldies. And I still watch the reaction to this day, like Paul Merson's reaction to the second one, where he absolutely loses his mind, is amazing.
It's, again, mention it with the Man City one, we are so lucky to be able to go to them sort of games and them occasions, and it's
the atmosphere was just one of the best atmospheres
I've. Your neck stand up every time I think about it and talk about it. It's a game that I won't ever forget, I don't think, because Real Madrid, with the injuries that we had, I think it's fair to say we was all excited for it, but there would have been a tinge of this could go bent very quickly. But the boys did an outstanding job, mate. I think that Mbappe had a chance in the first half, which Raya dealt with quite comfortably. Other than that, I don't really remember Real Madrid creating too many problems. Again, Miles Lewis-Skelly was outstanding. Jurriën Timber was absolutely outstanding against Vinicius. Didn't get any change out of him, was brilliant.
I have to shout out Yaga Kivior as well. Kivior against Mbappe.
Obviously came in with Gabriel injured.
Gabriel got injured. Yeah, so let's just quickly mention Gabriel obviously went down with another hamstring injury.
Another one for us. So for Kivior to come in and play the way he did, he had a nervy moment in the sort of opening 10 minutes. I think he gave the ball away in dangerous position. But after that, he was faultless. Declan Rice produced two of the best free kicks I've ever seen.
That second one was... The first one was really good. The first one was really good because it bent outside the wall and went in. The second one is the one that the goalkeeper will never, ever save. No keeper in the world will ever save it because it's absolutely the poster stamp, isn't it?
Of free kicks. I mean, I think the last one before that was Martin Odegaard against Burnley.
Yeah.
I mean, we do not score free kicks since... I shudder when I say this name, Yeamin, but since Robin van Persie left, we have not had...
We do not speak his name here.
Yeah, we have not had anyone who could stand over a dead ball and I feel confident that we're going to score from it. So to watch him score the first one was unbelievable. Me and my brother, who I have the pleasure of going to these games with, we just couldn't believe it had gone in, quite frankly. So then when
I don't think any of us could we? When it went in, we were like, wow.
I mean, I didn't even celebrate him. I just stood there with my hands on my head because I simply could not believe, first of all, that I'd seen a free kick of that quality, and second of all, that it had come from an Arsenal player. It was,
but then we get a second free kick,
mate. That second one, absolutely sensational. No words will ever do that justice, I don't think. You have to believe it because it was phenomenal. And Mikel Merino again as well, because
Mikel Merino again with a third clutch, to in the right position and a really good technique as well. Really good goal and
an outstanding finish and he had a good game as well. Really good.
Yeah, and then we go to the return leg in the Bernabeu, where the Real Madrid fans from the first leg going absolutely mental and say, the remontada is coming. Jude Bellingham talking about it. Videos, or you must have seen all the videos where it was. The Bernabeu is a different place in 90 minutes. Arsenal, you haven't got a chance. And all this social media content. Honestly, it was, and that we're going to plan to do this display and all this. And to give them credit, the Tifo display was actually pretty good.
I mean, we won't speak on Tifos as Arsenal.
We'll have to because Tifo gate, honestly. But we'll do that in a minute. But again, what a performance from the lads.
Yeah, outstanding, mate. Obviously, being 3-0 up was a massive help. It meant we could play, like we mentioned much earlier in this chat, we spoke about how it suits us to play against teams that come at us and leave space, and that's exactly what Real Madrid had to do. Played into our hands beautifully. We handled the occasion outstandingly well. I did fear the worst when Bukayo missed a penalty and then Mbappe conned the ref into a penalty. Thankfully, we didn't have a Premier League refereeing team on that day. I probably would have been a penalty. But again, the right decision was come to. But again, they only scored through William's mistake.
Bozo moment, isn't it?
Other than that, we were outstanding defensively. Saka, back from injury, showed his class again by stepping up and in the biggest game at the biggest occasion, scoring an outstanding goal. And yeah, again, mate, I thought the team out in Madrid were phenomenal, and I am so envious of those who were lucky enough to go to that one because
I am as well. That Martinelli last minute as well. You can't wish for any more limbs than that in terms of
to go. Is a big statement, and obviously, I think we deserved the win, and I think
everyone
would agree. From even the neutrals would agree Arsenal deserved to win that game, and so for Martinelli to get that goal late, and for us to be able to walk away from the Bernabeu with a win. Another win, sorry, should I say?
Yes.
Yeah, outstanding, mate. Brilliant.
We only do wins at the Bernabeu, don't we? That's all we do.
Absolutely brilliant, mate. And yeah,
I'm not gonna cover too much of the Premier League games because look, by this point, the league title. Yeah, we've given up. The league title has gone. Liverpool, credit to them. Congratulations, had won the title. We then get to the Champions League semi-final against PSG, who we'd played earlier in the season. But as you said, Joe, PSG were a vastly different team to what they were when we met them earlier and beat them 2-0. I'm going to touch on a few points here. The first being the atmosphere, because Arsenal tried to reinvigorate that atmosphere that had happened in the Real Madrid game, and I think rightly so. They tried to do that. There was a bit of controversy, the Tifo Gate, as we called it, because the Ashburton Army, who are part of the Arsenal fan base, had put together a design to submit for a Tifo for the game. And it was rejected. Now, I don't know the particular reasons. It can be due to copyright, it can be due to a number of things. But I think there was an ill-timed statement from the Ashburton Army around this was rejected, etc., without the context of what the club were doing. It subsequently came out that the club were doing their own Tifo. And it wasn't really a Tifo, we'll call it that. It was more a gigantic poster because it was just the Arsenal cannon. Fine to do that, but then at the game, let's say the execution was not the greatest. Would you say, Joe?
I think you're being very polite about this, Yeamin. I think that Tifo was shambolic, quite frankly. The beauty
we hadn't done it for 10. We hadn't done one in 10 years, and it actually showed, didn't it?
I mean, the beauty of the Real Madrid game is that the atmosphere came naturally. Nothing was forced. Obviously, there was the build up to the game. There was the hype around the game, but that would have come with a Champions League semi-final. Obviously, I know PSG aren't as big a game as Real Madrid, but it is a Champions League semi-final. So you're going to replicate that level of excitement, if not dwarf it. But that for me, it felt like the club were trying to force it too much. The Tifo was shocking. Unfortunately, it's kind of what I expected from the club. When I heard that they was going to do it, I thought it would be a very bland, corporate, not much to it Tifo, and it turned out to be, like you said, it looked like a old shower curtain hanging from the rail that's coming off.
I was in front, where I sit in the North Bank, me and Faisal, is right in front of it, and we could already see this was not going well because they were really struggling to get it straight, get people, and they were absolutely going mental. So someone, I'm not saying got fired, but someone got some kind of repercussions from that because it wasn't. The design itself was pretty poor. It was so bland.
From the East Stand, mate, it wasn't pretty. It was looking bad from the offset, and like you said, you had a great view of it. Leaning into the game, what I will say is that PSG, for the opening 25-30 minutes, were absolutely phenomenal against us. And
probably the best team I've seen in the first 30 minutes at the Emirates.
I've not seen anyone do that to us for a long time. We looked so poor compared to. We couldn't get near them.
Their press, and it showed in the intergame, was unbelievable. And obviously, that took its toll towards the latter
that
stage.
affects the atmosphere, doesn't it? The way they kept the ball, we couldn't get anything going, and obviously, you need the ball to build, get the fans going. But yeah, I mean, I feel it was a combination of things. I think Arsenal tried to force it too much, which didn't really work. And then PSG scoring the goal and playing the football they were all contributed to an atmosphere that I think we as fans can look back on and be quite disappointed with.
Considering where we were, and the occasion, and again, look, when PSG scored their goals fairly early on, and it does take the sting out of the game, but one of the things that really got to me was the lack of the fans didn't really spark the team. It was like, oh, great. And we're back to this whole thing of the atmosphere becoming like the library again, and disappointment and anxiety and all this. And it is part of being an Arsenal fan is, unfortunately, you get this. But in this kind of game where the team needed help, I think it wasn't the greatest performance from the Arsenal fans.
I think you've brought up quite a pertinent point there, is that the one that always stands out for me is, I think it was William Saliba scored an own goal at the Emirates in one of his first games. Can't remember who it was against.
Yeah, I remember. I can't remember who it was against, but and then we cheered it. We just
that strikes me and sticks with me because of the reaction to that was really. It was the first time I'd heard the Emirates really cheer and get behind the team after conceding a goal. And that continued throughout the season, which I thought was really nice. And I think that genuinely got us points that we wouldn't have got without that fan engagement. I don't know about you, but from my position last year, it felt like we lost that. I don't feel we ever really recaptured that.
I don't think so. I think expectations have now got so much that it becomes vitriolic, and it becomes
a very good point. Yeah. You might be spot on.
Divisive. When Mikel first came in and started to change the atmosphere, we had no expectations, and the problem is the expectations have now gone through the roof, haven't they? Effectively, we're expected to be at the top, and frustration always comes out. But let's move on, Joe, because we haven't got too much time left. We go into May. The Bournemouth game at home, we lose 2-1, but again, you can put some context. We're getting ready for the PSG game. We go to Paris and we lose the semi-final, and unfortunately we exit the Champions League at the semi-finals. We then go to Liverpool, go down 2-0, and then get back to 2-2, which I think actually was a pretty battling result. And then we have the second place playoff, which is us against Newcastle, and we win that 1-0. And we end the season beating Southampton 2-1 with Kieran Tierney, who's left the club now, scoring a goal and absolutely showing the emotions of it. But Joe, the game we have to talk about is obviously the PSG game in Paris. A very difficult night, wasn't it?
Yeah. Slightly different to the home game. I feel like we can't criticise the players too much. We played well. We did everything right. We created the chances, but story of our season, we didn't take them. I mean, the Declan Rice header very early on, Donnarumma, I mean, the save from Odegaard was outstanding. I think he made a save from Martinelli as well. I mean, we could have easily had a couple of goals in the opening half, and then before, the game's a completely different contest then. Again, even the save Donnarumma made from Saka in the second half, the miss from Saka as well. We had enough chances to win that game. We had more than enough chances to get into the final. It just wasn't to be, mate. And it's gutting because I didn't even watch the Champions League final because in my head I was convinced it should have been us. I think we should have been there. Just for, again, lack of clinical finishing has cost us in the biggest game in the biggest moment of our season. And all I can hope is that the board have watched that and said, okay, if we want to go and win big competitions and be a Premier League, Champions League winning team, we need ruthless finishers. We need people who can do something out of nothing. And that's what this team lacks. I think is across the board, everyone knows what we lack. And now, interesting that Mikel Arteta said in his last interview of the season, over to the board now. He's very much said and given everyone eyes into the situation, which are that he wants more players. He wants those players in. We want them. It's on the board now. So hopefully we can just go and get them players, mate, because them missing pieces would have got us to a Champions League final. And without wanting to be too arrogant, I think seeing what PSG done to Inter, I think we would have, unfortunately, beaten them and got on to win the Champions League had we got through that PSG game.
Again, it's what ifs, isn't it, my friend?
Yeah.
Story of the season.
Is
The rest of the campaign pretty much wasn't anything. I mean, coming back to beat Liverpool, coming back to draw with Liverpool, it was fine, but it was an end of season game. We could all feel that.
Yeah,
Newcastle.
The only thing with the Liverpool, mate, I will give them credit because to be 2-0 down at Anfield, I know Liverpool probably took their foot off the gas, but considering the PTSD we have from Anfield, I still think props to the players because to be 2-0 down at Anfield, it'd been very easy just to go.
Yeah.
So I'll give them a little bit of credit for showing some minerals to come back and get a try at that one. Yeah, but like you said, otherwise end of season just it came.
Yeah,
it was welcome.
It was very well. Look, I think beating Newcastle 1-0. Good, good to get second place after what we should have had second place wrapped up earlier. But yeah, just to close the campaign, I think all Arsenal fans are probably just a little bit tired. But Joe, what are your overall thoughts about the season? I mean, second place out of both domestic cups pretty early on. Not early, well, the Carabao Cup we went out in the semi-finals. Out of the third round at the FA Cup, Champions League out of the semi-finals. How would you sum up the season in your eyes?
So I'll break it in each competition. So FA Cup, very disappointing. Should have gone further. Should not have lost to that Man United team because they are an absolute abomination. So Mikel loses marks there for me. The FA Cup campaign, we should have gone further, especially when you see that Palace went on to win it. Definitely a competition we should, with our history, be doing better in. Carabao Cup, I'm very much a take it or leave it when it comes to the Carabao Cup. I'm not really too bothered about that. Newcastle, they in the end they went through comfortably. No arguments from me there. They outplayed us, and yeah, more than deserved to go through and eventually go on to win it. So fair play to them. Champions League campaign, I think, is what has almost saved our season. Dovetailing that with the Premier League campaign, I think to finish second with no silverware, it feels.
How would you rate the season from 8? On a scale of
1 to 10.
Yeah, 1 to 10. Go on.
I would give our season. Are we going in with halves? Can I give a half?
If you want to give a go on, give a half. We like decimal points here.
I will give our season a 6.5.
I was actually going to say the same as well. I think we are a good team, but there have been missteps.
Yep.
Quite a few missteps. I also think as well the drop points are not necessarily of our own making in some cases. Some of them are, but the cards, the controversial incidents.
Yeah. I will say, is to lose. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was something like we've dropped 21 points from winning competitions. If you want to win a track, you cannot do that. So
yeah, I agree.
Definitely an area we need to look at, but I think 6.5 is fair because I think second in the Premier League, yes, we wanted to win it, but you could argue there were some mitigating circumstances along the way.
Yeah.
The Champions League campaign, although ultimately it ended in real disappointment, there was a lot of highs along the way. and it's given us a lot of confidence, I think, going into next year. Looking at, so I think we get to 6.5 because you'd argue the Premier League season on its own was probably about a 5 out of 10. Champions League campaign, you could probably say it was around an 8.5.
Yeah, and it kind of evens out.
Yeah, I think 6.5 about some.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's room to improve. Certainly, I think the injuries haven't helped, but yeah, it's to get second, considering the state of the season, was not disastrous, but we certainly got higher expectations. Joe, I think we're going to end it there because we have gone on for 2 hours. If you are listening to this and you've stuck around, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We wanted to do something a bit more in depth. We will try and make it short, but a season review for Arsenal never is short. If you have liked what we've discussed, please do rate us on the sound platforms which you're listening to this on. We want to do more content. We're going to do a few more shows, and we hope that you enjoy it. Joe, any final thoughts from you before we end it?
This was everything I thought it was going to be, Yen. It was enjoyable in patches. It was horrible in patches. It was a look back on a season that ultimately I think that we're not entirely happy with. But it's felt good, mate. I don't know about you. I feel like I've exercised.
No, I'm mentally scarred again. You know, it's all come back to me. I'm getting angry again.
I feel like we've got it out. I feel like I've had a good. It's almost been like a nice therapy session to end the season. We can close that door, and we'll open the next one to next season, and we'll go from there.
No, now silly season begins, where it's already becoming a bit of a panic stations with the lack of transfers.
Let's not worry about that.
We'll talk about that on another episode. Yeah, Joe, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your insights as always. We're going to do more shows soon, and thank you everyone for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.